Stay updated with what businesses are doing in the Middle East and find new strategies to grow your business. I am Ayman Aitani, Business Growth Specialist, and this is BizWrap.
Today, a busy few weeks for Instagram Middle East. Instagram Reels, Instagram's answer to TikTok, has launched in the Middle East as of the 15th of March, only a few days ago. Also, Instagram Music is now available in the Middle East, and I will tell you why this is a big deal. Plus, we focus on the behind the scenes of what it takes for a live music production like that David Guetta did in Dubai at the helipad of Burj Al Arab earlier this year. And WhatsApp knows that we've sent messages to the wrong recipients. You've done this, and I've done this. And they've done a small change that goes a long way. Plus, our guest today is a senior VAT advisor. He will advise businesses who commission influencers to promote their products and the influencers who are building a lifestyle from the gifting and receiving payment from businesses on what they need to do to properly recognize VAT in the UAE. Lastly, in a retro bit, we reminisce on how exciting it was to get email. We don't feel that way about email today. I'm Ayman Aitani, and this is BizWrap.
Family Game Nights just got a super fun upgrade. We got a game of Corona-opoly. Around the game board are all the different places that closed down during quarantine, like the Eiffel Tower, JFK Airport, Big Ben, and more. It featured a ton of pandemic references, including in quarantine instead of in jail. The risk cards were also Corona-inspired, like get a free COVID-19 test and your sanitizer stockpile was found. The grocery cards were clever too, like pay online school fees, you won virtual prom queen, and you inherit toilet paper. Corona-opoly guarantees game night laughs.
Monopoly, the game that has been causing family fights and teasing since 1935. Let us take a look at Monopoly from both a business perspective and an adult perspective.
Monopoly, the game that has been causing family fights and teasing since 1935. I haven't thought about Monopoly as an adult or from a business perspective. The last time I remember playing Monopoly, like really enjoying playing it, was when I was in my teens, playing with my cousins in my grandmother's garden. That also got me thinking of, I have kids, I should have, memories that are more recent than that. And that got me thinking about why, and for two reasons. The reason, as parents like to hide behind is that, oh, they're too young to play this. But the real reason, if I'm being an honest parent, is that it takes a lot of patience. This game is hours and hours and hours long, and as adults, I don't think we have the patience as much as before to go through this extensive game. Now, let's talk about the business takeaways from playing Monopoly. Every time you pass go, you collect 200. It's a regular income. It's the closest to a salary. That was my gut feeling, and then when I opened it up and I saw it, there's a clear indication that it's a salary. So the small accumulations of the salary that we have, we're gradually turning it into savings in terms of property and other things. Don't hold on to cash. You can quietly keep on collecting cash without spending it. However, if you remember any of the family teasing that you used to go through is when you landed on one of their expensive properties. Community Chest is an example of an ecosystem. You interact with different members of your community, different stakeholders, your customers, your employees, your investors, your partners. Building a business involves interacting and building and engaging with the ecosystem around you. Be careful who you trust with money. Do you remember that feeling when you have a certain family member who volunteers to be the bank who handles the cash and you have doubts in their integrity? It's the same thing in business. Be careful who you trust with your money. I've been burned a couple of times where I've trusted customers with a longer line of credit and they end up not paying it. You learn from it and you come back from it. Product placement works. If I tell you that you were too young to understand product placement when you were watching the series of Friends, there are countless examples where Friends have a series of product placement carefully placed all the way throughout the TV series. It's part of the whole story. The last business takeaway is that patience in business is required. In the meantime, take it easy on yourself. We're playing this game for long hours, whether it's business or Monopoly. And some moves are good and others are not. Sometimes we're strategic and tactful, and other times it's chance and a roll of the dice. Take it easy on yourself in the meantime. What I do is, I know that if it's a bad day or a bad move, I know that tomorrow it's a reset. I'm going to start over and play the game again. The game that has been... Jad, when you're moving around, it's distracting me, my friend. مركز. Okay.
Instagram Reels is now available in the Middle East region as of the 15th of March, only a few days ago. What is Instagram Reels? It's Instagram's take on the fast-moving vertical video format that is popularized by TikTok. If you think the videos that you're watching now are short and fast-paced, you have not seen anything yet. So what do you need to do to get Reels? Absolutely nothing. In your Instagram feed, you will see them show up. So in videos in your feed, you'll see that there's going to be a small Reels indicator. It's a sign that's Reels. Also, the Discovery tab, you'll be able to find it. And if you want to create your own Reels, the same way you create a story, when you're creating your camera, you have the story aspect, and live, you'll have next to it the Reels format. Plus, this month, Instagram Music has also launched in the region. Music is a big part of my day-to-day. I use it as I work, the deep work that I need to do, or when I'm walking back and forth. It's something that gives me focus. And I was excited about this change to Instagram Music, because what it does is it adds a much deeper layer on how you want to share and express yourself via Instagram. So how do you add that to your Instagram stories? What you do is you create a story the same way you usually do, then you swipe up, then you have the music button. So there's a music button that you select, you search the library, and then there are two formats, one with lyrics and the other one with the artwork, and you can choose either or. I like to take a look behind the scenes of what it takes, whether it's business or creation of content or artwork. So I look at it from a perspective of what does it take to do it and why. What I found interesting about this approach is that the live concerts are different during COVID. I like to look at behind the scenes. So when you look at this from a business perspective, there's a huge amount of coordination when it comes to lighting, visuals, content, and there's a lot of pressure on the producers of the live concert in order to make sure that this isn't just like a Zoom call type of concert. So they need to add a certain layer to it, and this is what they've done with this concert, because there's not a live audience, so you have to add a certain aspect of it. So I like there's an extensive amount of drone footage, behind the scenes shots. You have lovely footage of Dubai as a whole, as a city, and there's a lot of coordination to help pull the whole thing off. The link is below in the bio for you to enjoy it, and enjoy it loud. You and I have both sent messages in WhatsApp, whether they're groups or to people, and then we'd rush to delete that message and say wrong group. You know what I'm talking about. We've all done this before. It was even worse when we were unable to delete messages before. Now at least we can. So WhatsApp took a stab at addressing this. So it's a simple change. So what they did was, now you can change the wallpaper of the chat message. So if you have a certain person that you are trying to deal with, whether it's work or a personal relationship, and you want to make sure that you don't mess things up there, if you choose a virtual, a colored background, a virtual background for that, what happens is your mind will be able to separate what that means. So it's a social faux pas that we're trying to avoid. Another WhatsApp change that happened is if you're the type that disables read receipts, so meaning that if somebody messages you and you read it, you don't want to tell them, you don't want to show them that you read it. There was an aspect where the voice notes were exempted from this. So if somebody sent you a voice note and you heard it, it will show it to them. Now WhatsApp has widened the disabling read receipts so that when you listen to a voice note, it won't tell others. When I look at this, it's we create a wicked social web that we tangle ourselves in about who do we send messages to? Is it a wrong message? I don't want them to see that I read this. Did they read my message? And so on. So I think it's our own messaging reflects our social behavior. Next, influencers in business. Businesses love chasing influencers to gift them, to pay them to promote their products. And influencers, they love being chased, gifted, and paid. What do both businesses and influencers not think about during their courtship is how do they properly manage and declare their VAT. There's a VAT law in the UAE that has clear guidelines on how an influencer needs to deal with a business or a business needs to deal with the influencer. We're joined today with Bastian. He's a senior VAT advisor for Baker McKenzie Habib Al-Mullah. He will clarify what businesses and influencers need to do. What is Bastian's background? Deloitte, done. KPMG, done. PwC, done. And now he's working with Baker McKenzie Habib Al-Mullah, and his focus has been in the region and in Europe on VAT. Hello, Bastian. Thank you for joining us today. So,
hello.
What are businesses currently doing wrong while engaging with influencers, and what do they need to do?
Hi, Evan. Thank you for having me. Just to thank you for the introduction to tell me where I worked. It's a large number of places. Yes. So, just to start, there's no in the VAT law. There's no specific reference to influencers or artists or any in any form. The VAT law is very broad, so any person that is a natural legal person that carries out an economic activity on an independent basis and ongoing basis is in principle subject to the VAT law. That person is also required to register or apply for VAT registration if it exceeds the VAT registration threshold of 375,000 dirham annual revenue turnover, that is. So every business, whatever, if it is a freelancer, if it's an influencer, they should assess whether they carry out an economic activity, whether they provide services, and whether there is consideration, whether they receive consideration in return for that. And if they exceed the thresholds, they need to think about applying for VAT registration.
So what are the steps that you'd recommend the business do? Because a lot of businesses, when I speak with them, when I ask them what are they doing on digital, on the internet and ads and so on, they say, oh, we're doing Facebook and Instagram and influencers. They bundle the influencers as part of their digital endeavors, although it's not technically that. But so those who like to bundle everything there together, what are your recommendations for those businesses who are looking to engage with an influencer? What are things that they have to check first? If that influencer has a license, so they have a VAT TRN number, a registration number, or, because usually they obsess about how many followers does he or she have and things like this. So what are things that they need to look at?
Yeah, so from a business, purely a business perspective, when they engage with an influencer, the only thing that they should really check from a VAT perspective is that when the influencer issues an invoice with a VAT amount on it, like 5% VAT in the UAE, they should verify whether that invoice is correct and whether this influencer is actually registered for VAT. So that is on the business, because they will want to reclaim that VAT back as input tax and set it off against their own output tax. They do not have to check whether the influencer should have been registered for VAT. If it's not, that responsibility is on the influencer. They should assess themselves whether they need to register for VAT.
So if I'm a business and I receive an invoice from the influencer, assuming that influencer can issue an invoice for me as a business, I need to check the basics, right? So it has a tax invoice, it has a VAT TRN if they've registered for this, the 5% is there. So that is what I need to look for. Is there a flag for me as a business if I ask the influencer to say, "Where's my invoice?" And they don't have one? Is this a flag for me as a business?
Well,
because influencers are creators, right? They don't have the strongest business acumen. At least they don't look at themselves as businesses. And I'll get to them now in a bit. But they don't look at themselves as businesses, although they should. So that might come as a surprise to them, and so on. So what should I do as a business if I ask for an invoice from the influencer and they're lost or confused?
Well, I think just purely from a VAT perspective, the risk in this respect is completely on the influencer, because the influencer is providing a service to the business. So the influencer has to determine whether he needs to charge VAT. So the invoicing is not. I mean, if you want to issue a tax invoice, it needs to meet the requirements in the VAT legislation. But just from a commercial perspective, I think as a business you would also expect an invoice for your accounting purposes. And I mean, I would normally not pay anyone if they don't give me any invoice or a request for payment, because there's no way to track it or have any proof that I actually paid this. So that's just from a business perspective. But from a VAT perspective, if they don't issue a tax invoice and they don't charge VAT, from the perspective of the business, there's no real issue.
The reason I bring this up is because a lot of the businesses, they're very enthusiastic about an influencer. It's like, "Oh, Ayman, this influencer spoke about us," or "We did this with this influencer." They're very ecstatic about it, and technicalities of an invoice or not is not something that they tend to worry about. They always tell me about, "Oh, we work with this girl or this guy. They have X million followers or X 100,000 followers," and so on. That's why I bring this up. So if an invoice comes up, and how does the business recognize it from an accounting perspective? Is it under like a marketing expense, or how would they recognize it?
Yeah, I think they should recognize it as a marketing expense. And what I do want to add is that if the business would provide the influencers some like free goods or an experience, or like if it's a car dealership, they give the influencer a car for a couple of months to drive in, then this is being regarded as a supply by the business. So the business is giving the car to the influencer for the influencer to use. Then the business needs to determine, they need to issue an invoice for the supply of that car or for giving away these goods, because it would be treated as a normal supply for VAT. So I'm not an influencer. So if a business would sell a good to me, he would charge VAT if it's registered for VAT. But if it instead gives this good for free to an influencer, and the influencer then markets the product, it should be treated in the same way. This giving away this good the business should also charge VAT. if it's registered. And if it's not registered, but is counting whether it exceeded the threshold, then this free product that is given away should also be included in the calculation of that threshold.
So practically, if I'm an influencer and I receive a 3,000 dirham handbag, I receive it for free, I still need to pay a 5% VAT on this as an influencer.
Yeah, the business, they should charge VAT on top of that. Whether they actually invoice or like ask the influencer to pay the 5%, or whether they pay it the 5% out of their own pocket, that's up to the business. I think the whole concept of free product loses its value if you say, here's a 3,000 bag, but please pay me the 5% in cash. I don't think it works. So I think the business can consider paying that from their own pocket, but they should still issue the invoice and actually give that invoice to the customer, because this is a requirement under the law that the invoice should be delivered to the customer. So there has to be some invoicing, and the VAT on that product should be remitted to the tax authorities via the VAT return.
So let's look at this at the parallel side, which is the influencer themselves, right? So they have something arriving at their door. So they receive random gifts in hope that they like it and they'll share it with their friends. And others are more formal, where they say, look, we're going to engage you for 3 posts. We're going to pay, this is our budget, or the influencer has a rate sheet that says, if I visit your store, you'll pay me this. If I post 3 posts, you'll pay me that, and so on. So that's usually the case. So what would I need to do as an influencer? Because influencers, for those influencers who are watching, you are a business. I know it's uncool. I know it's not as fancy as you think it looks like in the lifestyle they're trying to build. But at the end of the day, if you're getting free products or cash for work that you're doing, and why or another, you're a business and you should be proud of it, and you should find a way to properly monetize, to properly recognize VAT, to have people to help you with your accounting and taxation, and look at your profitability on this. So because as you grow, and if you look at the global influencers, they build huge businesses. And this is a core part of what we're asking Bastien for advice for. So Bastien, what's your advice for influencers who, a lot of them, they don't think about the business aspect of this. They think about their audience and they think about the creative angle that they need to promote a product. So what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, it's basically the same as for the business side, because well, first of all, you should consider, am I doing this on an ongoing independent basis? Because if you do a one-off marketing promotion for a product, you might say, okay, this is a one-off thing, and it's not really a business from a VAT perspective. But I suppose that the aim is to do this on an ongoing basis and to generate ongoing income from this activity. So it would fall within the definition of a business from a VAT perspective. And then you need to consider whether you exceed the threshold of 375,000, and that does not only include like monetary payments, but also like the gifts and the experiences that you receive in return of the services that you provide. Just to say it very legalistic, you provide services for consideration, which is the free experience or the good. This is known as a barter transaction, where basically two supplies are made by each party of the barter transaction. So in the case of the handbag, if you receive that handbag for 3,000 dirham, clearly the business that gives you this handbag values your service at 3,000 dirham. So therefore, your turnover is 3,000. And if you add all those gifts together and you exceed the threshold, then you should consider applying for VAT registration. Once you're registered for VAT, you should also be charging VAT. And in the 3,000 example again, you have charge 3,000 plus 5% and issue an invoice for that.
I like your perspective on this when you're saying that when a business gifts an influencer 3,000 dirham bag, that means they're valuing their service or collaboration at that value. So that's also one way to do it. So, and that's why I understand why if you receive gifts throughout the year that exceed 375,000 dirhams, that means your business has received that amount of monetary goods, even if it's non-cash. Hence, you qualify to exceed the threshold, and hence the need for VAT. Is this something that businesses worry about? That discuss with you, say, is this something that comes up of we're dealing with influencers or marketing and so on? Because usually I don't think the marketing team is the one that deals with you from a VAT perspective as well. So is this something that comes up or not so much?
Well, it hasn't come up in a not in a professional circumstance, but I think this question is doesn't really only apply to influencers or artists. It applies to all freelancers in the end. If you are a freelance journalist or like a handyman, it also applies to that person. So it's from a VAT point of view, it's interesting to understand when a person, from making your hobby your business, it's kind of when does it become a business, and that is very gray. So because I worked in other jurisdictions, this question came up more often, but here in the UAE it hasn't come up yet, because I think the perception is that yes, I am only in business if I have registered a company or if I have a license to do this business. But VAT really applies irregardless. So it is a very independent concept. And it's, like I said, the concept of business is very broad and captures all activities by any person. So it tries to capture everything. And you have to regard it from the perspective of fairness, or because a marketing company that could provide similar services as you would, as an influencer would do, they would have to charge VAT. So why should they have all the burden, but you as a independent freelance influencer has a lighter burden, because you're kind of competing with them, so you're subject to the same tax regime.
I'm with the aspect of self-perception, because a lot of them think that they're on the creative side and this doesn't apply to them. One last thing, Bastian. YouTube also, because there's a growing trend about taxation regarding services and YouTube and influencers and so on. So there's a recent change in the taxation with YouTube in the US, related to influencers, even if they're outside the US. Are you aware of this? Do you know if this applies for influencers in the UAE and Saudi?
Yes, I'm aware of this change. I'm not totally sure whether it's a change or just like it's similar to the UAE, where it's just like a kind of reminder or a kind of change in approach. Yes, I'm aware of it, and I understand it only applies to income generated through the YouTube platform from US residents. So. And if there is a tax treaty, a double tax treaty between the US and the country where the influencer or the YouTube creator is resident, then the tax rate might be reduced. So the standard tax rate is 30% or 24%. But if there's a tax treaty in place between the two countries, it might be reduced to like 15 or 0%. Unfortunately, there's no tax treaty between the UAE or KSA and the US, so that means that the full rates apply. So in the case of a business, I think they say if it's a business registration, it's 30%, and if it's individual registration, it's 24% of the income generated from US viewers. So it is a development that the influencers in the UAE should be aware of. and it's recommended to apply with the information request, because otherwise they will just apply the full rate. So I think it's recommended to comply with it.
Okay, so if my video on YouTube has a million views, and from the ads generated, I would earn $10,000 on this. You're saying that from those $10,000, there's a subset of those that are only in the US. So those who see them in Europe or the Middle East and Saudi and so on, there's no tax application, at least as of yet, on this. So if there are $2,000 of that $10,000 that is from US viewers, I would owe as an influencer the 24% that you mentioned. So what YouTube would do is they would deduct that 24% of that amount and deduct it from my payment, and they send it my way.
Yeah. There's nothing you have to do. There's no compliance requirements for the influencer.
But it's money gone.
Yeah, that's the only upside. Yeah, it's a withholding tax, so the payer has to withhold the tax. So you receive less, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. So if I'm to summarize regarding influencers and businesses in the UAE, for the businesses, Bastien, before they engage with the influencers, they need to recognize that this is a business engagement like they do with any marketing agency, as you mentioned, or marketing resource, and they'd expect from them recognition of this. So either via a proper invoice for that, or at least internally, the company will need to, from a VT perspective, make sure that it recognizes this collaboration as a form of an invoice where there's 5% VAT, including non-monetary gifts. And this is an important part. So a lot of the influencers based on gifting, whether it's a 300,000 dirhams car or a 3,000 dirhams bag, there is even if it's given away for free, there's a 5% that somebody has to pay, recognize, and pay from that perspective. So that's the business perspective. And from the influencer's perspective, you are a business. That's your long-term goal from your content generation and your community building activities and so on. And a solid step towards that is to get a proper license that reflects this, and have VAT, and have a form of an accounting resource to help you recognize this. Thank you, Bastien, for shedding light on this topic, especially that there's a lot of this going on in UAE and Saudi, and there needs to be clarity for businesses and influencers to do the right thing. Thank you, Bastien, for joining us today.
Thank you. Very good. Thanks.
My kids were watching something on TV, and I came across this bit while they were watching. There was huge excitement about mail, and that reminded me of the time, long time before, where we were all excited about mail. We would read every email we got. We don't have this feeling now, right? So we're not excited about mail now. So even when I was back in college in class, I used to get bored in some of my classes. I used to have the Nokia communicator. I dial in. So there wasn't mobile data at the time. So no 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G that we have now. It was that. So I used to dial in to, and it was slow at 9,600 baud. So for those, so it's 1/5. If you think dial-up at home was slow, this was 1/5 as slow. Horribly slow speed, but it was definitely better than some of the classes that I was in. BlackBerry captured this in one of their magazine ads at the time, saying they used to use the term email separation anxiety, and we all had that. So I used to wake up, and the first thing I do is I'd turn on my computer and I'd wait for it to load. And then I'd have a shortcut on my desktop to dial into the internet. And I checked my email that accumulated since the few hours that I checked while I was sleeping. I was a college student, right? So there's nothing business critical yet. I checked my email extensively. All of us did. At some point, email went wrong somewhere. So it went wrong. None of us had the email separation anxiety, and we all wouldn't mind it going away. So that's it from me for today. Thank you for joining. Comment with your question or topics that you'd like to cover. Until then, I wish you inbox zero, which is a theoretical, difficult way to achieve a state of clearing your inbox down to zero. Thank you for joining.
All right, the episode is over. Thank you for watching.